Mhm. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to October's AC3 meeting. I want to first take a moment to say happy birthday to Pratiksha. Happy birthday,
Thank you.
Pratiksha.
Thank you.
Today, I know I think it's okay to say your age. You're turning 28.
Mhm.
28 is a pretty big time in a lot of people's lives.
Mhm.
And Pratiksha's now been with us for a little over a year, and we're so thankful to have her on board on our team. Pratiksha, have any words about your birthday?
No, I'm excited. Yeah, because I'm also going home today. So I'm excited. Yeah, but I've had so much fun the last year, working here.
Excellent. Well, happy birthday.
You.
We hope you have a fun trip to visit family.
Thank you.
Okay. So here's the agenda for the day. We're going to do brief updates. And then, as this is the last in our series of budget planning discussions, we will then review all of the project ideas that have come up for Percent for the Arts funding and discuss them. And that includes both capital art project ideas, so restorations or replacements, as well as new projects, and then discuss how much money we want to go towards Arts Bloom non-capital funding. We haven't really discussed that yet. We didn't discuss that in the last AC3 meeting, how much money we want to go towards Arts Bloom round four. Then we'll do one kind of last call for candidate projects. And then next week, you can expect to get an online survey to vote for which projects you believe should be funded in next fiscal year. Mm. There we go. Excuse me. Okay, so brief project updates. I promised you all an email overview on the City Mark sculpture artist selection process that hasn't happened yet, and I apologize. We will get that to you very soon. We did follow up in conversation with Community Foundation as well as with internally with our budget folks on the idea of a public art maintenance fund managed through Community Foundation. Unfortunately, what we have found is that through state guidance, state law guidelines, a fund cannot have its primary source of money be government funding. So, in the future, if there is an opportunity to start a fund with other private side foundation funding, city money could contribute to it, but it could not be the majority and ongoing funding for a capital F fund. Um, we're further exploring that discussion a little bit with some nuance, and if we find anything else, I'll report back to you all. And then we're still, the idea of murals and overpasses is still a project idea that we're exploring. And certainly, if anything comes up before kind of the online survey next week, we'll let you all know. But really, what we're trying to do is find the overpasses that are solely city owned and city managed because so many of the overpasses are either railroad or they're partly state and city owned or managed because they might be state managed expressways, say. So, which causes some jurisdictional issues and challenges. So, we're really looking for, I think the ideal candidates would be ones that are solely city owned and managed. And if we can find some of those again in time for this round, we'll let you all know. But it looks like it might be something we work towards in a future round or rounds. Any questions on those topics? Okay, cool. All right, so let's hop into, we're going to start with the capital project candidates that have come up so far. And first is, oh, I want to do a review, sorry, of the funding. So for fiscal year 26-27, we have an estimated down here, the third row, $201,000 for allocation. But we also have $89,700 we have set aside for public art maintenance, in addition to $117,300 in unprogrammed capital funding from previous years. So the total that we could be talking about today is $408,000. Keeping in mind, of course, that the previous funding cannot be spent on operating, so it can't be Arts Bloom. Arts Bloom has to come from next fiscal year's amount. So the 201,000, some portion or all of that is eligible for Arts Bloom, but the previous held money has to be capital art. Okay, so for replacement restorations, here is the short list we have come up with. Some of these are familiar because we talked about them last time. A couple of them are new. So, street painting at Park in Berkeley to replace the Pride crosswalk that was there before the repaving that happened recently. And we estimate that at around $5,000. Restoration of art walk installations or assessment of art walk maintenance needs. This is part of we don't know how much this would cost, and this is part of a longer conversation that we're really digging into now. That might have been something I could have given an update on. We met with Johanna, Ellen and I met with Thomas and Doug to talk about art walk, and we're kind of trying to pull together all the information as much as possible. Um, it's a big thing. There's a lot to it. So we're trying to kind of look at all the installations and understand options moving forward. So it's an ongoing conversation, but we're digging into it. And we're committed to having that conversation and kind of figuring out how to move forward. The next thing is assessment of maintenance needs for all public art on city-owned property. Now, this came up because in the last AC3 meeting, when we talked about Art Walk, a couple of you brought up the important consideration of we can't just be doing public art maintenance on an as needed, project by project when things get dire basis. We really should be taking a holistic, broad view approach for better long-term public art stewardship. So we estimate that that would be around 40,000, and that's based on knowing how much one specific similar study cost that was done in Phoenix by Designing Local, the consultant that's working on the arts and culture plan. And then the last two here were added by Kat in the last Kat meeting. Central Library gazebo improvements. There's the gazebo in the outdoor area at Central Library that is used sometimes for cultural events that apparently needs some updates to it. And similarly, there's two gazebos in Maplewood Park that also need improvements. So before I move on, I kind of want to stop at each slide here and just kind of discuss the projects so that we're not trying to discuss the full list of projects. Take them one slide at a time. So comments, discussion on this, questions. Thomas?
Yeah, so I just had two questions. The street painting of the Pride crosswalks, how was that paid for in the past before we had this? I
Hmm.
mean, I see it's popped up on here, but where was this coming from? I mean, it's been painted for many years now, so where was that funding coming? And my other question is, are the library gazebos and the Maplewood gazebos considered art? And does that come out of this fund, or where did it come out of before? Yeah.
So let me see. I'm not sure who is here to talk about. Kevin, do you know? I know there was for the street painting. I know DES used to manage a street painting program. I don't know if this came out of that or if it was actually a community group that paid for it. I'm not sure. Are you aware?
No, I'm not certain. If I had to guess, I'd say DES, but you know, I don't know for certain. So,
My
Okay.
recollection is it was DES and when the first time it was painted. So I just am curious how it got moved over
It's
here.
I believe it is DES and that same street painting crew. They actually were just on site a week ago at the Ave repainting our walkway, and the painter happened to mention that crosswalk as well. So I'm pretty sure it is DES's paint crew.
Well, I
If
mean,
I could
not the
also,
paint crew so much. I just meant who's paying for it.
Who's
well,
paying for
can I
right,
just
right.
can I clarify? Because there probably isn't a line allocated for that purpose. So they probably got a request, or I think that was done under previous leadership where they were told to do something and they took money from something else to make it happen. So there probably isn't an ongoing fund for that purpose.
I mean, you're probably right about that. I mean, it's been many years that it's been painted, and so I'm just wondering where it was paid for, and now why is it now being put here? So that's just my question.
Would we consider street murals to be public art, or would folks say street murals are not public art?
Yeah, I think probably it could be considered public art.
Hmm.
My question is the decision to move it from somewhere else to this fund. Like, I'm just,
But if
it's
it
been
didn't
paid
have a
for.
home, if it didn't have a home before and it was just an expense that had to find a place,
Well, that's what I would like to
you
get
know what I mean?
clarification on, though.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
think
did it have
Thomas
a
is
home?
I think Thomas is worried about setting a precedent where somebody does something once and
Yes.
then all of a sudden this fund is making up for it because that's a wonderful mural. I
I
mean,
mean, are we going to be responsible for painting the green line down Main
right.
Street for St. Patrick's Day? I mean, I'm just, you know what I mean? Like, it's once you start down this road, where's the line between, well, this is for the art and this needs to be paid for through the arts funds, or this is public transportation? I mean, you know what I mean? Like, I just feel that's, are the yellow lines in the street also art? I mean, you know what I mean? It's just like, it's where's the line here?
I think I think
Just a thought that
oh,
possibly when it was a crosswalk, then it was DES's responsibility, and that's the problem now that we're not allowed to do it as a crosswalk. And so I think it isn't the painting now going to be in the center of the intersection?
yeah.
So that's not a traffic feature that the city would take care of. So that's sort of an additional, I think we'd look at that as the additional artwork that's happening in the middle of the street. And it's not the crosswalks that DES might have been responsible for. Just a thought. I'm not sure, but just thinking that might be the issue.
And I
Okay,
want to
well, go ahead. Sorry, Heather.
well, I want to chime in here too that city planning office, we don't have oversight over any property. So when we talk about public art on city-owned property, we're talking about either DES managed property or DRIVES managed property or libraries managed properties, kind of by the nature of what we're talking about. And so I think I understand what you're saying, but there isn't necessarily, does that make sense? Like everything that we're going to do capital wise is going to be on someone else's property that will be in addition to potentially what they're already doing for arts funding, and some of whom don't necessarily have like annual dedications of arts funding. Does that make sense?
No, it does make sense. My concern, I guess, is that this is starting to set up a precedent where certain things will automatically now be just considered an art funding thing where, for example, with Art Walk, yes, things happened on public property or, different sculptures and whatever. Um, but they were funded primarily by private donations. So what I'm saying here is maybe some of these things are money's raised to do them. Like it's not always just going to be, oh, we've got money over in the arts fund to do this. So I'm just saying there's another avenue here to go down where we don't just deplete the funding for arts on these type of projects when you could maybe, we could probably raise public fund or raise private funding for some of this. And so that's just another avenue to explore rather than setting this up as like every time now there's going to be this, somebody else wants some kind of a, cultural whatever in the middle of the street. And so that's an art,
Yeah. Somebody else
we
is
do need to
updating
be
and we're going to call it
cautious.
art.
We need
Like,
to be cautious about that, I think.
I guess I just don't understand though. I know what you're saying, but I guess I don't understand what the difference is between like say like our first round of capital art, we did murals on a school and two art centers, right? And a library. And I don't know how you
are
couldn't
we
maybe make the argument of those, right? But
are we planning on putting out a public call for participation in the
yes,
completion of these projects?
yes.
And is that
Anything
call
that's
going to be targeted at artists or is it going to be targeted at contractors?
artists,
Okay.
100%.
Because when I'm agreeing with Thomas because like I don't want every time a city building needs to update a bench outside, they're gonna call it art and
Right.
pull that
Yes.
money from this fund. Like I think we need to be careful to make sure that the money is actually getting in the hands of Rochester artists and not just supplementing department budgets in the city for city maintenance crews to do general updates and maintenance that should be
Got
done
it.
by the city anyway.
No, that's a great, so that's helpful. And maybe Thomas, does that kind of speak to what you're talking about, like the difference?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm talking
Okay,
about.
that's
Yes.
really helpful. That's really helpful. No, we would absolutely do a call for proposals for this to find an artist or a team of artists. But that's maybe a good segue to talking about the gazebo topics, right? Because this is, I know the gazebos are kind of a unique or different, unusual than what we're used to talking about. I think the idea was that these are, capital projects that support cultural programming, but it maybe is that, yeah, can we
If
talk
an
about this?
artist isn't earning that money, then it is not coming out of these coffers.
So I have a challenge to this um, question that's being raised. Part of the funding for a percent for the arts also goes to performance art or dance or music. So if there's a venue that needs to be upgraded in order to host those events in diverse neighborhoods, which I would argue 14613 Edgerton would include one of those neighborhoods, is that not a valid use of this funding if it then allows public performances, dance performances to take place, of perhaps a small play that's put on by an artist that's paid to create the play? Would that count for this funding?
If it's not a public venue, it shouldn't be receiving capital
It is
funding.
a public venue. These are public venues and public spaces that are
Oh,
accessible to
no, like,
anyone.
I mean, not just that it is
Well,
accessible to anyone, but that it is like public, like the sidewalk is public, not like I could walk in it at any time 24/7. Like it needs to be broadly public, not a nonprofit or something because and nonprofits know that grants usually don't support capital funding. They will support programming, but they don't typically support capital funding. And I do think that that's a kind of slippery slope because I can list a dozen nonprofits that have public events that desperately need money for this or that project. And I know what those projects are, but I think that if we're going to have this be the percent for the arts, our initial focus was getting the money into the hands of artists. And if we switch that to getting the money into the hands of art institutions, it's going to both change the goal of this and drastically change how the artists in the public perceive this organization and this part of the city project because they will see it as not funding them directly. Giving $20,000 to somebody to fix up something is nice, but it's not actually, that money isn't actually going to get into the hands of artists. It's going to go to contractors who are doing the work to fix a thing.
Blue, you've had your hand up for a little while. Sorry that we didn't call on you before. Go ahead.
No problem. Yeah, I want to second some, I think, pretty obvious concerns about the gazebo. I mean, I think if you ask the average human being in our community, and definitely the average artist or arts professional, um, do those three gazebo projects, seem like they should be funded by a percent for the arts, especially one that is so limited in our community? I think they just kind of, we could bend and we could kind of bob and weave to justify. But I think at the basic level of what a percent for the arts is, the intention of the legislation and the intention of this whole effort for the last multiple years, they just don't fit. I think it's pretty obvious if you look at the overview.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions, discussion of these candidate projects? Okay, thank you all.
Can I just clarify or
Yeah.
ask a
Oh,
question
sorry.
about Sarah's point when she talked about spaces that could be used for artists? I don't know if this is what you meant, Sarah, but certainly the point would be still relevant if you're talking about spaces that are wholly publicly accessible. To Amanda's point, I'm not necessarily making a case for the gazebo, but just in principle, if there is a venue that is in a public space like a park that is fully accessible, and that venue, if improved, would create greater opportunities for local artists. I think that sort of general question is still one that we could answer. I think Amanda makes a very good point that if it's not, obviously publicly accessible, then it's pretty questionable whether that would be eligible here. But if
Yeah.
it is very publicly accessible, is that something that we would consider to be a candidate project?
So I have 2 points of clarification, and then I have a comment also. So Central Library is a public space. It's publicly accessible. That's the gazebo in question. This slide could be updated. Maplewood Park is also a public park, fully accessible to anyone in the public at any time. And those gazebos are located in Maplewood Park, which is a city park. So the 2 locations that are posed for gazebo improvements, which could be taken in any way that the RFP is written and however artists interpret that, and actually an artist could respond and could do the work with support from the city, are both in public locations. So I just want to clarify that. I think this slide is a little confusing because it doesn't state park.
I apologize for that, Sarah.
That's okay.
misspoke
And then
on-
I do want to say too, the city has in the past allocated funding to nonprofit organizations to do public improvements. And that is part of how previous leadership has spent city funding. So there is also a history of the city doing that, not only just public investment, but smaller nonprofit organizations have received city funding to do capital improvement projects. So there's history for both. I think the question is more of what Kevin's saying is, how do we want to approach this now that there's a percent for the arts program, that the AC3 exists going forward? How do we tackle these projects? And I don't believe that what you're suggesting, Heather, is that funding is given to the city to then do something to those gazebos. It would be a similar RFP process. There would be some sort of artistic elements. Artists would get funding to do some of that work. And then it's possible, once those gazebos are actually in working shape, other organizations could program them more fully and expand the venues for where art can happen. Because one of the things that we see in a lot of our park projects is people want stages, people want gazebos, people want public spaces where art can happen. And there's only so many of those throughout the city. So this is an opportunity to make sure we're spreading those, as we've said we want to do, to have more venues across the city.
Thank you, Sarah. Rena?
Yes, my question is maybe going back to what Thomas's point that was being made around whether we're talking about upkeep and something that should be in the city budget elsewhere, or we're talking about the creation of an arts related project or initiative that includes artists, right? I've lost in this train. I've kind of lost. Are we talking about the upkeep of or the maintenance of something or repairs of something like a city facility, a public, whether it's public or whatever it is, isn't that another budget?
So I don't know, I think part of what you're saying is rhetorical. I don't know if you're looking for a specific answer, but I think just to call back to what Sarah said earlier, there's not necessarily existing ongoing budget lines dedicated to, say, street painting projects or the gazebo improvements, right? So yeah.
But I
Somehow we
think
started also
Rena's,
talking about buildings and or facilities and different things like that too. So when I think of the gazebo, I was literally thinking of it as in this is it's not necessarily a facility, but the upkeep and maintenance of it, it's not in the city budget anywhere?
Well, it can be in
Or
the
are we just
budget.
talking about a piece of it? Like, oh, there is an artistic element that needs to be repaired. And so an artist is going to come in and repair that element. And couldn't we distinguish what the funding should go for and say, oh, if it's the arts part of the thing, then yes, we could fund it. If we're talking about tearing out the roof of something and then maybe because it's falling apart, that seems that's maintenance, repair, upkeep, or something elsewhere in the city budget.
yeah, I think your question, Rena, relates to Hillary's question in the chat too. I think it's a fair point to kind of like I personally don't know what the needs are of any of those gazebos, but if some of the needs are like just truly structural and then some of the other needs are truly artistic in nature, then maybe there's a possibility here where we're looking at both percent for the arts funds and just normal city capital funds to do the structural repairs. I don't know what the nature of the needs are, but I suppose that's a possibility. Now, I also suppose you could make the case that just something that's purely structural could technically be eligible through this funding program because of Sarah's point, because it's improving spaces for future performances and such. So technically it could be eligible, but it's kind of up to all of us to chime in to say whether it rises to the surface as a top priority. Whether it's eligible and whether it's a top priority are two different questions that I think are fair for this group to discuss.
Antoinetta?
Thank you so much. I do want to say that I agree with Heather, Rena, Thomas, and Amanda, because I was just thinking with Rena, great minds think alike. Like what is cleaning it mean and what is upkeeping it mean? That word, when you guys kept saying upkeeping it, I was thinking, well, what do you mean by upkeeping? More artists painting over it, or more artists like fixing the lines of the bench? That I can understand, but like just upkeeping it or cleaning it, totally like a separate budget. I'm for that. So while I see everyone's point of where the budget should be, what perhaps we could come up with a checklist of which budget is going to go whichever, if it needs to be upkept or if it's going to be another artist fixing the picture itself.
That's great. Thank you. So I think for the purpose of the online vote next week, we'll try to get clarification on specifically what those projects could include or would include, so that there's clarification on that. But we appreciate the great conversation. I do
just say
want to
one
be
more thing,
mindful
sorry.
of, I do want to be mindful of time. I want to take a couple comments for
Of
sure, but
course.
we still have a couple other slides to go through, and so I just want us to keep that in mind. And Hillary has her hand up, and Thomas, I think you have a comment too.
Yeah, the city definitely has a capital fund, and half of those, from what I know about how we all work, are for emergencies, dealing with emergencies. There's a water main break, there's something else like that. These are not hugely expensive things, but I wanted to know if Heather, if you or Kevin know what the city's appetite would be, if you say, hey, AC3 is putting in $10,000 to upgrade or repair the art in the space, but we also need $30,000 to upgrade or repair the actual physical gazebo. Is that something the city's going to say, okay, or are they going to say, wait, we already gave you money? Go with it.
So I think if that's a hard question, I think we could follow up with our respective staff in those departments to kind of get an idea on that. What happens with the budget, right, is that every department that oversees city facilities basically has to put in their requests every year and then go through the budget process, right, to see what can get prioritized and what there's funding for. So I've sat in on, capital improvement program committees a couple years now, and I don't need to necessarily emphasize this too much, or I don't want to be dramatic, but it's a little bit heartbreaking to see the amount of dire needs in city facilities that then the city has to kind of prioritize and say, well, we don't have to replace this roof immediately, so we can wait 3 years for that. So I guess I just bring that up to kind of because I think that I worry that sometimes there's a perception in the public that city has like a big chest of money and is like somehow hoarding it or not, spending it in ways that could benefit the community. And the city has dire facilities needs. And I know that those of you that have buildings can relate to that, right? Yeah. So I think, yeah, I think Hillary, that's a really interesting and good question. And I think we can follow up with our library and DRY's counterparts to kind of see if they think that could be a possibility. Thomas, did you have something else you wanted to
Yeah,
add?
I'm sorry to keep prolonging this,
No, it's okay.
but this discussion is a prime example of why we need an arts and culture office department in the city, because we technically do not have any power. And so when these discussions are happening, although I appreciate all of you who work for the city and are on this, there's not actually an office that says, that goes into these discussions representing that office. And so as someone who worked on the original ordinance for this arts 1% for arts, back in almost more than 20 years ago almost. I, this was not part of the idea. And so to me, things have gotten a little cloudy. And that's why I bring this up actually initially, because I think we need to get real specific about what the money is going to be used for. And if things get added on here and added on there, or if discussions happen and things get added on, I just think we need to be very clear. I think Rena said or somebody said in the chat about what is our mission and what is it, what I mean? I just think we need to get very clear about that before all these different things start being added on and on and on and on. And in a way, this group doesn't really have a say. I mean, we do, but we officially do not. And so we're not exactly a department of the city. And so I just think that we need to keep those things in mind moving forward, so that, 5 years down the road, everything that some other department needs to have done doesn't become something that we, just as a caution.
And I personally think to kind of combine what Thomas and Heather are saying, honestly, to be perfectly frank, this feels a little bit like a money grab. This feels like, ooh, we got a little bit of money. Let's make sure we can spend it on this or spend it on that. And I can see that eating up this fund very quickly. And without artists centralized in making these decisions, and I think that is one of the bigger problems with what CAT is versus the AC3. Is there are fewer voices of artists involved. So there isn't anyone in that room to say, hold on, wait a second. Is this money actually going to artists? And I think that if we're not going to have a majority of artists making those suggestions, we need to make sure that that group is then adhering as closely as possible to the guidelines that we originally set.
So I think
Excellent points, Amanda. Excellent.
we've heard you all loud and clear. Like this is good and good conversation. And I do want to say I think this is aligned with when we did the public art policy revision to expand to include non-capital, not just capital art. We also removed the terminology art installations and enhancements to actually prevent some of what you're talking about, to prevent funding, to make sure that funding was going towards art-centric artwork. Okay, so again, I want to go ahead and if everyone's okay, I want to move on and make sure we have time to talk about the next couple slides. So again, some of these will look familiar because they came up, they were part of the discussion last time. There's the idea for the painting on the base of the I Heart Rock sign, the mural on the Zamboni wall at MLK Park. And then some other folks brought up ideas for other MLK Park murals as well. And then at the last AC3 meeting, Thomas brought up the music installation that will be happening. Thomas, do you have any more information you want to provide about that? Do you know is there an estimated cost for that? Or what the progress of that project is? What stage of yeah.
I don't have exactly an update, I don't think, but I do know that the costs of the instruments slash sculptures slash playground stuff range between $5,000 and $15,000 a piece. And I know that there is some, private money being put together for that. But I just want to make sure it was in here because I think it's a public thing. And so, yeah, I don't want to push this too much, but I want to make sure that that information is included.
Who's overseeing it? Do you know?
Yeah, I don't know offhand which office in the city it is. Sorry. It's parks and,
Okay.
recreation, but I don't know. I can't remember the person exactly. Sorry.
Okay.
I can give that money. I can get that money.
Okay.
Or I
Okay.
can get that information to you.
Okay, cool. And then lastly is the idea for a mural on Lyle Avenue. And this really came out of the discussion last with AC3 on the need for an equity lens and looking at our map of arts investment and finding areas that haven't historically had much arts investment. Lyle Avenue was one of those corridors that was brought up specifically by Amanda. And so we were looking at Lyle Avenue and the different city-owned properties there. So there's a firehouse and a library and a school on Lyle Avenue. So that's a potential. We also were thinking mural because mural was the top voted public art that people want to see more of as per the surveys that were done as part of Arts and Culture Plan. And that was murals followed by functional art and sculpture. So we thought that could be a good potential focus for capital art spending this year. So I want to point out too that the last two are kind of use an equity lens in terms of where they're located and expanding the experience of public art. The first three kind of take a different lens in terms of if you remember the percent for the arts goals, there's two. One is expanding the experience of art so that everyone can experience art regardless of where they live. And the other is increasing economic opportunities for local artists. So with a specific focus on local artists, these sites would provide kind of a high traffic, high visibility area for a local artist. So, discussion, questions, comments about these candidate projects.
I forgot to mention that the William Warfield Interactive Park is going to also have a performance stage. So I should mention that.
I'm gonna.
Are you looking for a vote? at this point, or is it you're looking for opinions?
No, sorry, I mentioned this at the top of the
I'm sorry.
meeting. It's okay. We're going to circulate an online survey next week. So today is really about just having a full discussion so that we can all hear each other's perspectives in order to kind of inform our vote next week. In addition to kind of a last call for any additional project candidates.
And this would be essentially once if we make this decision, then an RFP goes.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank
yes.
you.
No problem.
I want to just reiterate again, like Rena said in the chat, let's make sure that I'm not sure MLK Park has been decorated many times and has lots of beautiful murals already. And yeah, of course, it would be great to have more, but there are lots of places that have none. So I want to make sure that we're getting this money into the neighborhoods that really need the beautification and the uplift.
Thank you, Amanda.
There's some, I do want to, I don't have this information in front of me right now, but the Joseph Avenue Arts Master Plan. Um, there's been a lot of work that's gone into the feasibility of very specific arts related influences and projects in the corridor, creating this corridor that we've been talking about for some years now. How do we connect the dots between this? It was, the city sponsored Joseph Avenue Arts Master Plan and get some of that onto this, in the works for actually being implemented. It's the only thing that was funded was the actual study and the charrettes involving the community and those pieces. So
I think that that's an important point to bring up, and we can connect with DES about it.
okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
Jason, I am sorry to sound like an asshole. Where's the El Camino Trail?
The El Camino Trail goes all the way from Upper Falls, from High Falls down through the 14621 neighborhood, all the way down towards Seneca Park. So it has had murals, several wall therapy murals. Many of them are still actually there. There's the Avenue D Rec Center, but most of the El Camino Trail goes through is Avenue D, and all through Clifford. So there is need for murals throughout that area, and there's also upkeep on a few other murals. But yeah, I would say El Camino neighborhood. I always say the plaza always needs more updates. Thank you, Annette. Is we have a mural there that needs to be worked on, and there's a beautiful, huge wall that we can convince the Chinese restaurant right next door to use, and that'd be a beautiful piece for the North Clinton neighborhood. So there's avenues even on North Clinton, and the International Plaza is a performance space for dance, art, music, all through the year, and it's a city area. So, and we want to have more artists and more artist involvement at the plaza.
If you have any, I will mention that even though sometimes you mentioned the restaurant, I think, offering their wall for a mural. Even if a wall is publicly viewable, we can't spend percent for the arts funding on it unless it's on city-owned property. That's just a heads up.
We do have buildings that are on city-owned property that still would be perfect for walls as well as the giant Rochester logo that needs to be repainted. It's been faded. It's really faded and sun bleached.
That's great. Okay. I mean, it's not great that it's faded, but it's a
No.
good, it's a good candidate.
But I know it'd be nice to allocate some money for that. So.
Okay, cool. Okay, any other comments, questions, suggestions? Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So again, we haven't really talked about Arts Bloom, and to some degree it makes sense because Arts Bloom, it's broad, right? We kind of go out and just do a call for proposals. There's less need for necessarily talking about specifics, but I think this is a good moment to take a beat and really talk about how much we want to set aside for Arts Bloom, in particular for round four. And just to refresh your memory, the first round we did 100,000, second round 170,000, and third round that we're currently in right now is 100,000. And we have 201,000 available in next fiscal year in general. So I want to open it up to any thoughts on how much round four should be for.
I mean, it does seem that we should just split this, in half, the 200,000, that 100,000 goes to Arts Bloom and the other to the public art thing. But but then there is also the money left over, right? The 117,000, something like that.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that because those other public, murals and sculptures really in a sense require extra money for materials and how expensive it is to do those things, that maybe a portion of that money should also go to those to put into that fund so that there is a little bit more there for those projects that actually do require more money. That's just my sense of, I mean, I don't think all 117,000 should be spent, but I do think a portion of that should go into the other fund. That's my thought.
Anyone else?
Heather, can you show me? I'm too dyscalculic to figure this out. Do you have a slide by any chance with all of the numbers on them at once?
For how much money we have right now?
Yeah, like if you click back a couple slides, would that one be informative
Oh,
for us
yeah.
to figure out like what are we doing for Arts Bloom? Um, do you have a visual on those numbers?
Well, I have for today's, let me show you what I have. Today's was, just have this.
Oh, that's helpful.
Okay.
So we have the estimated funding for fiscal year 26-27 is the 201,000, and that is what we are deciding how much of that goes to Arts Bloom.
Exactly.
We have already in the coffers 117,000 that is specifically for capital funding.
Exactly.
If we do 150,000 for fiscal year 26-27 for Arts Bloom, put 50,000 towards capital funding, then that would be a pretty even split, I think. It would boost the Arts Bloom, which would do a great job of putting money into artists' hands quickly. And then the capital funding, I think, is more of a long-term put artists in money's hands use of money, but it would still be at 160,000 still be enough to actually accomplish some things, I think.
I agree with Amanda because 100,000 for Arts Bloom, I mean, that will go like that. I mean, for projects, it'll be very limiting. So I like what she's proposing.
Yeah, I like that. I like it too.
Awesome.
Kevin, is there something logistical that I'm missing on why that wouldn't work?
No, no, I think that's a good suggestion. I just want to clarify on the numbers here. Heather, the 117 that's unprogrammed, that's outside of the funds that have been programmed for centering youth, right?
Correct.
And that can you remind me what that number is?
250, well, it's 175 capital, 75 programming.
Okay. So we've got that. for the Center and Youth Project, which is ongoing, and then the additional 117 for capital. So, okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Heather or Amanda, could you just restate your moving of 50, how that would go?
So I think I'll repeat it, and that way I can make sure Amanda can tell me if I have it right. But of the 201,000 for fiscal year 26-27, roughly like 150 of that goes to Arts Bloom, and then the other 50 it goes along to capital art with the 117,000 that we already have as unprogrammed capital, so that we have 160,000, 67,000 for capital art. Does that sound right? Okay.
And then if I could ask a follow-up there, the public art maintenance amount is, it seems very specific. That's predetermined by a formula. Is that correct?
So yes, that's a good point. We all decided to set aside the amount of 10% of what we have set aside for capital art. So we have to factor that in to what we're deciding to put towards capital this year and kind of add to that. That's why it's so specific, Blue. It's like supposed to be 10% of what we have set aside for capital art.
Is that maintenance fund something that we can use for some of those projects that we were talking about earlier instead of dipping into these other pools
So
at
that
this point in time, especially because we don't have a lot of projects from AC3 that need maintenance at this point in time?
So
Well,
that anything on the replacements restoration slide could potentially be funded through the what we've set aside for public art maintenance. Yes.
And I just wanted to toss out one more well-known public artwork near Lower Falls there. It's been in disrepair for so long. I believe it's called the Seat of Forgetting and Remembering, something like that. It's been in disrepair for a long time, but it's an actual artwork that was commissioned by the city many, many years ago. It's somewhat provocative, and it's in really bad shape. So I wanted to toss that onto the list of actual public
Yes, I
artwork
second that
need
one.
work. Yeah.
Yep. Second that one.
Thank you. Thank you, Blue. Thank you, Rena. I'll add that to the list. Okay. So that's the last thing I really wanted to do was do kind of a last call for other project candidate ideas. Anything else or any kind of last thoughts that someone might have on what we've talked about today?
Heather, I just want to make an additional point about those capital projects. In one way that we might sort of view the capital side of the equation, then we view the Arts Bloom side of the equation. It's not just on the capital side, it's not just a matter of how much money is in the pot. It's also a matter of how much capacity do the staff have to manage capital projects. So for example, and I'll just make up a number, if we had $200,000 to work with over the course of a few years, all added up for capital, and we had numerous project ideas that we all really liked, and you total them all up and it actually fit in that $200,000 pot. The math might work there, but the capacity might not. So that's just another sort of consideration is how many capital projects do we have the staff capacity to manage? I don't know if we could put a number on it right now, but it's probably fewer than we would like. We would love to have more staff to help that. But it's definitely a different kind of management cost in terms of hours compared to Arts Bloom. So just something to think about. Even if we could fit lots of projects in the bucket, we might not be able to manage them all.
Thomas?
Yeah, thank you, Kevin, so much for saying that because I think in our discussions and especially our deliberations, I think we need to be thinking in a broad sense about how these things are implemented? What is the back work that has to be done? I mean, I think it's not just that we want, and we do want artists doing lots of work, but there is a kind of limit, especially, again, I reiterate this, because there is no specific office for this. And so I just want us to be a little cautious about that or thoughtful about that in our decision making. That we want to do everything, yes, and I wish we could do everything, but the reality is that we have to do it within some structure and prescribed structure, really, on limitation, because we have limitations. And so I just think we need to really be, this group needs to be thoughtful about that. The reason I suggested leaving some funds in that capital, is because I'm concerned about the next couple of years, really, and how the federal funding will flow or not flow into these projects that then give us some money. And so I'm just trying to think ahead where if we spend everything we have, that just in a time like this, it just might not be the wisest choice. To just leave a little there so that there's something in case of a rainy day, which I have a feeling it's coming. So anyway, that's just my.
Thank you, Thomas.
I might argue, Thomas, that it is a rainy day right now. And I don't, I mean, we're all freaked out, but I don't know if giving money out to artists becomes our goal and assuming it will come back versus holding money in case there's an, emergency situation. I think we're in that. Well, I think we're in that.
There's only a portion of the money that can roll over from year to year. Some of it does have to be spent in that fiscal year, correct, Heather? Jake, Kevin?
So the Arts Bloom, whatever we put aside for Arts Bloom has to be spent within the fiscal year. Capital funding does roll over. We don't want to take that for granted. It's not a forever thing, right? When capital funding is sitting around for 4, 5, 6 years, then there starts to be concerns internally about it being spent. Yeah. Okay. So again, expect to see an online vote. Thank you all so much. Really good turnout and just discussion today. And I just want to remind you, if I haven't said it lately, that I'm inspired working with every single one of you. So thank you so much for showing up today and showing your passion and talking with us. Thank you. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.